Good evening, folks. We're going to go ahead and call this July 9th regular City Commission meeting to order. Before I ask for an approval of the agenda, I'd like to recognize the absence of Commissioner Hersom. He is out on a family vacation. And we would also like to welcome Richard Maltby to the dais with us. He is going to be taking over sharing our legal responsibilities with Scott Walker. Courtney, someone is trying to steal her away from us. Now, I haven't had a chance yet to deal with that issue, but I'm going to get on it. But we're going to see what we can do. But we do wish her luck if she still chooses to go. And we're going to welcome Richard to the dais here with us tonight, and we look forward to many years of working on great things in the city of Newberry.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and we are very sad to see Courtney leaving our law firm, but thankfully she's here tonight for some moral support and helping me out tonight. So happy to be here.
Awesome, and welcome. And with that, also I want to send my condolences to Pastor Lewis King. He was going to give our invocation tonight, but he is under the weather, so we wish him a speedy recovery. And with that, I will ask for an approval of the agenda. I have a motion from Commissioner Coleman, a second from Commissioner Martin. Any comment or discussion on the agenda from the dais? Any public comment or discussion on the agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passed unanimously. Would you please stand for the invocation, which will be given to us by Minister Hassan. We appreciate you stepping in, and if you would remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance at the end of the invocation.
Dear Heavenly Father, we come with bowed heads and humble hearts, asking you to have a special look at this group, at this commission, at these group of citizens that are gathered here today to come together to make decisions that are best for everybody in our community. We thank you for showing us your love and your grace and your mercy. Thank you for keeping your hedge of protection all about us. We're going to ask you to protect our city from any disasters, harms, or dangers. We just ask you to look at us and touch us with your finger of love. Give every man an open heart, open mind, and a compassionate soul as we make decisions that are relevant to all of us that live here. We thank you for all that you do for us. We give you reference for being our creator, our sustainer, and making every provision for us. We ask these things in your Son Jesus' name, and all the believers say amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Minister Hassan. All right. Mike, I believe we have an employee spotlight.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we sure do, and I believe we have a photo image that may or may not be showing up tonight. And
we all know Carl.
And we may or may not have an employee that he's not going to make it tonight. He's put in a long, hard day, and he's not going to make it tonight. But we do all know Carl Wilson, who works in our Public Works Department, and if you know him, you know what a great guy he is. He is really pleasant to work with. He's a go-getter. He gets things done and has the most even-keeled personality of anyone I think I've worked with. Carl is not a graduate of Newberry High School.
That's the only problem. Yeah.
He's a graduate of Santa Fe High School from very close by. And that's part of what's playing into this employee spotlight. He has 37 and a half years of experience in the public works sector. He brought that from Alachua County, and he retired from Alachua County, and he is at retirement time again. And so he's indicated to us that in December of 2018, he's going to be retiring his second time, and we're going to have really, really big shoes to fill. He's been an ambassador for the city and does a great job day in and day out. And, public works is kind of a thankless job. It just really is. It's hard to please everybody. You have a tremendous amount of opportunity to make mistakes or to not get something right to someone's expectation. And happens a lot in public works, but Carl has been a great ambassador for the city and has worked very hard, and he is going to be greatly missed. So in his downtime, he enjoys fishing, bowling, and golf, and is a Gator forever. A Gator forever. And just a quick funny story. Some weeks ago, some of the younger guys, our up-and-comers, our shooting stars, got to bragging about bowling and how good they were at bowling. And apparently they didn't realize that Carl was really a sharpshooter. So there was a challenge issued, and so Carl agreed to go bowl, and I think he bowled about a 250 and blew them out of the lanes. But he's now a legend. He is now a legend in the public works camp for someone that really backed up the game after people called him out. So when you see Carl, thank him for his service to the city. He'll be around for several more months. We'll be able to see him at the Christmas party, but he's really going to be missed.
And we'll recruit him if we ever put together a bowling team. Okay. And now we have our citizens announcements. I'd remind you that these are the non-controversial announcements. If you have an introduction that you'd like to make, tell us about a garage sale, go right ahead. Be sure to introduce yourself, Miss Peggy. Do you see a
Or
little green
an
light?
interesting Friday the 13th evening at the Firehouse Gallery.
Ooh, yes,
And I'm going to
please
read a
tell.
little bit.
All
But
right.
the author, it's a local author who has written several books, and I can't read that small without my glasses. Local author Jess Elliott will be reading from her 2 short story collections, Ghost Life and Tales from Kingsington. Haunted places, haunted people. Stories are more macabre and unsettling than out-and-out scary. The intended audience is older teen to adults, is both language and content aimed at adults. And I had told some people that it would be okay for children. Jess is suggesting not.
Macabre and unsettling, probably not.
I don't know. The kids love ghost stories, but maybe her language is sometimes more appropriate for adults. But Ghost Life is available at the Alachua County Library and in Kindle and physical form at Amazon. Tales from Kingsington is also available in book form on Amazon. So,
Awesome.
6 to 8.
Is that a
And-
free event?
It is a free event, and there will be cheese and crackers and some adult beverages. So come and have a good time. What more could you want on the Friday the 13th?
Sounds perfect to me.
Sounds
Yeah.
good to me, too.
A little ghost story in Newberry. I like it.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I'm Marlon Day, Alachua County Library District. I wish we could have adult beverages at the library. We'd get a lot more people to our programs. We do have a couple of programs that I'd like to bring your attention to. The first 3 are children's programs. Mike Stillwell will be performing this Thursday, July the 12th at 3 p.m. He's doing a Science Mike show, and Mike is always a lot of fun. He comes out almost every year. Next week, we have Bats and Bugs coming in on Tuesday at 11 a.m. We have the Luby Bat Conservancy is bringing their program with live bats. That'll be at 11 a.m. on July 17th. And then Thursday, July the 19th at 3 p.m., an entomologist from the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services will be bringing trays of bug specimens from the Florida State Collection of Arthropods over in Gainesville. They won't be live bugs, alas. Some may fly in naturally, but other than that. We also have an estate planning workshop coming up on Monday, July 23rd, 2 weeks from tonight. It is a city commission meeting night, but Sheila Smith, who is now running the Ed Jones over here, will be providing an overview of estate planning, including account registration, beneficiary designation, and other information. And she always brings a nice spread when she comes to her programs. And last, we announced the last time that I was here that the Pulitzer Prize winning author and University of Florida professor Jack Davis is going to be visiting the branch. That's going to be August 30th. It'll be Thursday evening at 6:30. So please save the date. And please share these items with your constituents if you have any questions.
Marlon, when you post the estate planning one, will you tag me in it to remind me so I can help share that when I get a lot of requests for that kind of help?
I will.
Guys have any other questions for Marlon?
The estate planning is at 6:30.
As always, Marlon, y'all are doing an awesome job over there.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it all. Thank you, sir. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. My name is Darla Whistler, and I'm your Alachua County Judge candidate, Group 2. Wanted to take this opportunity to meet those of y'all who I've not met. I know several, Mr. Coleman, Mayor Marlowe, and Commissioner Martin. I am currently employed by the State Attorney's Office, where I've worked for 11 years. And I'm here tonight with my husband, Lieutenant Scott Tumman, with the Levy County Sheriff's Office. We're going to stay until the end of the meeting so that if any of y'all have any questions, we have literature, we have yard signs. We'd like to get to know y'all and answer any questions you may have about my candidacy. Thank you.
Do you have a
Website.
perhaps a meet and greet that you might be
Yes.
having here?
I'm sorry, yes. The mayor is co-hosting a meet and greet at the Bullock Law Firm here on Newberry, or excuse me, is
Newberry
it?
Road.
Newberry Road. And my website is darlawhistler.com.
Awesome.
And the meet and greet is July 19th from 6 to 8 p.m.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Adult beverages will be provided there, and I believe Commissioner Martin had a question as well. Was that? All right.
All right.
Wonderful.
Thank
All right.
you.
Anybody else have any questions for candidate Whistler?
6 to 8.
6 to 8, July 19th, Bullock Law Firm, right down there. And apparently, Mr. Bullock's wife is a wonderful cook, and she's going to be heading up the hors d'oeuvres committee. So everybody is invited. Please come and spend some time with the candidate. All right.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for being here and staying the whole meeting. That's rare. Any other public comments? Okay. Hearing none, we will move to the consent agenda. I have a motion to approve the consent agenda. I have a motion from Commissioner Martin, a second from Commissioner Coleman. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Motion passed unanimously. We'll move on to our first item under public hearings ordinances, which is a first public hearing to consider applying to the Florida Development of Economic Opportunity for Small Cities Community Development Block Grant. Ms. Wendy, you want to come down and we love it when Scott comes to meet us. You give the greatest presentations, and they're always full of exciting opportunities. So.
Thank you. I appreciate that. My name is Scott Modisette. I'm with Summit Professional Services. I'm here tonight to conduct the first of 2 required public hearings for the city to apply for a Community Development Block Grant, also known as a CDBG. The CDBG program, through the application process, has some citizen participation requirements. This will be the first public hearing. I'm going to go over some of the grant activities and categories that are available to the city. We'll take public comment and any comments from the commission on what you might want to pursue for these funds, and then there'll be a second public hearing on the 23rd, which will bring back a draft application for your review. The Community Development Block Grant Program, some of you are familiar with it, and we've done them here in the past. It's a federal program through HUD that the state gets around $27 to $30 million every year, which they then reallocate to small communities in the state of Florida through a competitive application process. The competitive applications are actually due August 13th. We weren't sure if the city was going to be able to apply for this category. There'll be another, for this cycle, there'll be another cycle probably in February, January or February for the 2018 funds. But since you were able to close out your economic development category grant, that put you in a position to apply for these funds. So it's kind of a tight cycle that we're working with. Again, applications are due August 13th. The city has the option of applying for either, it's a $700,000 grant. The city has the option of applying for a housing rehabilitation program or a neighborhood revitalization program. The housing rehabilitation program provides funding for low-income homeowners in the city. Yes. Oh, I forgot. I got a PowerPoint. Fancy.
And Scott, if you will, just move that microphone up just a little bit. Our people watching on YouTube get it a lot better.
Okay. I'll try to talk into it. The housing rehabilitation program assists low-income homeowners with health, safety, or code issues with their home. It is required that the individual, it has to be an owner-occupied home. It has to be within the incorporated area of the city, and also the applicant has to be below 80% of the area median income for their household size. That category of grant we'd probably be looking at doing around 10 to 12 homes for owner-occupied homes in the city. The other category that you can apply for is the Neighborhood Revitalization Program. That assists communities with infrastructure improvements such as sewer, water, street resurfacing, flood and drainage type projects. The requirement being that at least 51% of the area where the project is located have low to moderate income households. And that's established through income surveying, where we actually go out to the homeowners and do a quick survey of each home in the area. There's some types of projects that community center, fire station, if the city as a whole were to be 51% low to moderate income, you could apply for what's called an area-wide project. Your low to moderate income percentage is around 36%, so you're not eligible to apply for an area-wide project. So any infrastructure project would have to be targeted towards a low-income neighborhood area. There's also a category for commercial revitalization. That's for downtown improvements, sidewalks, business facades, streets, or street improvements, street lighting. That, again, requires that at least 51% of the city as a whole be low to moderate income. So that category exists, but it's not open to the city because of your demographics. There's also an economic development category that's available to the city. You've done a number of these here in the city. That is up to $1.5 million. It provides for public infrastructure to support a new or expanding business, with the caveat being that the business has to commit to create a certain number of jobs and document that job creation as a requirement of the program. Again, that requires that a participating business participate with the city to apply. There's no deadline for that grant, so it's open now and will continue to be open until all of the funds are expended or the next cycle opens in January. 51% of the jobs that are created by the business have to be for low and moderate income persons. I think that covers that. I went ahead and worked up a scoring analysis for you. It's tough to compare when we're looking at which category the city would be more competitive in. What we do is we work up a scoring process. The grant applications are completely objective. There are certain criteria that are either met by this community or not met by the community, and then points are allocated for those criteria. So when you look at the neighborhood revitalization category, what we do is the areas that are shaded in blue there, those are calculated by the state. There's no opportunity to change them or modify them. That they're pretty much set. The yellow area that I've listed there, those have those are based upon the type of project you're going to do. For example, if you were going to provide new sewer into an area that doesn't have sewer, it scores better than, let's say, a street improvement repaving project or sidewalk project. And then also the number of people that you're going to assist with the amount of grant funds you're requested, and also the number of households that you're going to assist. So a project, if you propose a project that's going to benefit 200 homes, it scores better than, let's say, a project that was only going to assist 50 or 60 homes. So what we do when we're looking at the service area, we want to at least meet the 51%. We also look at calculated densities to determine that the grant dollar per household is above a certain amount to get the highest score in your application. The city also has the ability through investment. We go back. The purple shaded section there. Through local investment, the city putting forth money. If you were to complete plans and specifications for a project where you had biddable plans and specifications at the time the application is submitted, you would get an additional 100 points for what's called readiness to proceed. Also, if the city were to contribute up to $50,000 in leverage funds, you can score out another 25 points in your application. And then there's certain health and safety points. Those are typically given to community if let's say your wastewater treatment facility was under a consent order, or some type of enforcement action from the state, you get an additional 50 points for that. It's good to score zero. It's good to score zero. It's intended to assist projects that are in dire need due to enforcement action. What we do is we take the score, just looking at, we have a subtotal there, and then we have a total at the bottom with additional application, what we call application enhancements or investments by the city, or health and safety. what we do, we look back over the previous several years to see what the minimum funded score was. So with readiness to proceed and with leverage, you score relatively high over the last 2 years. 2015 was a bit of an aberration, just the way that the funding worked out. There was a lot more money that went into the neighborhood category than we typically see. So we can calculate your score with readiness to proceed and with leverage is going to be around a 639. Looking at the next slide, which I will do. This is your score for a housing grant. Score relatively higher. When you submit your application, it's going to be dependent on what other communities submit applications as well. So all of the communities that submit for a neighborhood category grant are going to be scored against all of the other communities in the state that submit. And if you were to submit for a housing category grant, you are scaled against all of the other communities that submit for a housing grant. That said, your housing application actually scores better than your neighborhood grant, all things being equal. We've also seen the last 2 years, all housing applications that went in were funded. So that's a consideration as well. There just haven't been a lot of housing applications that have been submitted over the last 2 years. They are a little more complicated to do. The application process for a neighborhood category grant is more elaborate. The application process for a housing grant is somewhat easier, but once the application is funded, there is a process that the city would go through to identify homeowners through an applicant intake process. You would hire a grant administrator that would do all of that, and then also a grant administrator would assist with hiring contractors, bidding out the work, and overseeing the contractor. Each individual homeowner has to submit an application to the city to be a participant in the program, and those are scored separately and ranked against each other, with the priority being low-income senior citizens with a documented disability are typically the highest priority for that program. The criteria are similar. The good thing about a housing grant is the activity stays the same. If you propose you're going to do housing rehab, it's the highest scoring activity that you can accomplish. And then also, since you're only doing low to moderate income homeowners, you can maximize the point values for that as well. So that's how it scores out. We've worked with city staff. We've been trying to identify potential infrastructure projects, looking at drainage, street repaving, paving of new streets, and it's been difficult to get the densities that we need for the way your street layouts are. 2009, the city did a street resurfacing project that did a large portion of the city, and it included nearly 300 homes in the service area. It was pretty widespread service area. We've had difficulty targeting an area that is at least 51% low to moderate income and also has the densities high enough that we need to score high for $1 per household and $1 per beneficiary. So I'm here, it's a public hearing tonight. I'm here to get input from the commission and also if anyone from the public has any comments.
Does staff have a recommendation for that, or that's a question mark?
That's a question mark. What we're looking for, what we typically ask for is a motion as far as action from the commission, is a motion from you to proceed with a regular category grant, and also a motion to proceed with an economic development grant should a potential business present itself.
And the commission can move along both of those fronts at the same time. They don't have to pick one or the
Yes,
other.
sir.
They do have to pick housing or community revitalization.
Yes,
but
sir.
The ED is we can move forward with that one at the same time.
I just need a motion to proceed with a regular category grant, but I would like some input to know whether we're moving in the direction of a housing grant or a neighborhood grant.
Okay. Questions from the dais? Commissioner Glanzer?
On the EDC one, would one business have to apply for just one project for that $1.5 million? For example, want to run sewer east towards, the DCC church is the only business we have on that road going east, but it sure would help the city to have that sewer line, and it's close to 1.5 million, 1.2, so.
We had, Cox Lumber at one point was going to go in out there, and we had worked with them on doing that type of project to loop the sewer system out there. Or I think it was actually water lines that were going to run out there. The main thing about the economic development grant is that you have to have that business, you have to have basically an empty piece of land out there that a new business is going to go into, and without the provision of the infrastructure, they wouldn't be able to locate there.
I have one second question, I'm sorry. And also on that 700,000, you said would only do 10 to 12 homes? That's like 70,000 each? or something?
That's the number you want to commit to. That's the minimum number of homes that you would need to do through the program. We would try to do more. The program, if the cost to rehab the home is greater than what it would cost to demolish it and rebuild a home, then the program will demolish a home and rebuild it in place on site. So if you had, let's say you had 10 demolition replacements, it'll use up your money really fast. That's typically not what we see. Some homes, the way the program is structured, we have an inspector that goes in and he does a work write-up on all of the code issues that are in the home, and the program requires that we correct everything in the home. So if a homeowner, let's say they don't want new windows, but the work write-up indicates that they need new windows, they either have to participate in the program or not. We can't pick and choose work items. So it's really dependent upon the scope of work on each individual unit.
Commissioner Farnsworth?
Which one has the better possibility of getting approved, the housing rehab or the neighborhood revitalization?
At this point, the housing rehab.
Okay. I wanna-
Any other questions from the dais? What's your best guess on the neighborhood revitalization? The housing is better, but do you think we would have I don't know that we've ever not succeeded with your guidance, so would we?
It really, at this point where we are in the application process, and I don't want to say with absolute certainty that you would get a housing grant, but the score, given the history of the housing program, is a very high probability that you would get a housing grant.
And the revitalization's a coin toss?
That is kind of a coin toss, depending on whether we could identify a service area and get the income numbers high enough.
Okay.
51% is the maximum, the minimum number of homes. If let's say you have a service area of 100 homes, if you got 51%, 51 of the homes in there are low to moderate income, that's the minimum number you need. To get your score high enough to be funded, you need to be up in around 65 to 70%. So then it kind of becomes a balancing act. And we don't know what your score is going to be until we actually go out and do the income surveying to determine.
Any other questions from the dais? Questions from the public about community revitalization or housing? No questions from the public. Does staff have a comment to make on this?
Mr. Mayor, just want to make sure the commission understands the recommendation.
We don't have
Can
one.
we advance the slide?
Oh, there is a recommendation.
Or is there?
I have 2 more slides after that. And 1 more.
There is a recommendation. Okay.
So then staff requests that the commission consider a motion that includes this recommendation.
Are you asking to pick one of those two?
No, it's
Or
both.
One is for the ED and one is for the...
And under recommendation number 1, where it says insert specifying a type of regular category, if I'm correct.
That's housing or...
Yeah.
You may if you
Or
want to.
you
at
could
this
leave
point.
it blank.
Or you
and
can just say regular category.
pick the one that has the highest chance for success as we go through and we do our data collection.
Correct.
So you're saying there's an option to continue the data collection process and then pick the one that has the highest score, so they don't necessarily have to choose tonight? Do they have that in front of them? I thought they needed direction, housing, or revitalization.
I don't want to start surveying if the direction is to go for
One or the other.
housing.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I would
Commissioner?
like to make a motion to allow us to move forward with the CDBG process for preparation of that grant.
Second.
Was that
Is
enough?
that the,
You
Wh-
said
which
we didn't
one
have
are
to
you-
choose, we didn't have to choose, you said.
well,
I would choose,
I think
I
we've
want the
confused it a
home
little
rehab.
bit.
That's what my
So-
motion would be for.
We're going to make a motion to proceed with the economic development. On the other one, Scott's saying he wants to know us direction.
I would say the
Community,
home rehab would be
home
my
rehab are,
motion.
okay, so let's do it one at a time. Let's have a motion on the category for home rehab or community revitalization. Your motion is for home rehab?
Yes.
Do I have a second for that? You second that. I have a second from Commissioner Coleman. Any other conversation on directing staff to proceed with the home rehab?
My question is,
Commissioner Farnsworth?
how do we know which one is best if we haven't done a survey of the areas?
His recommendation. He's looking at the past scores and saying
Well,
that
and
you're making a prediction, right?
What we've done, we've sat down with staff and we've looked at some different infrastructure projects in the city. And we then mapped out the homes that are located in what would be our defined service area. And there are 2 drainage projects and I think 3 paving, repaving projects. If you did all of them, which we don't know what the cost would be, if the grant would even cover all of that, in our initial assessment, there are not enough homes in those project areas to do a neighborhood grant. We need a more targeted project with in a higher density neighborhood.
Okay.
I would say just historically speaking, I think most of the board was up here the last time we had to make this decision. But in my recollection, the last time we did make this decision, we went for the community revitalization and we indicated that the next time around we would try for the housing. Now that doesn't bind you guys in any way, but those comments were made the last time we had this chat. Commissioner Martin?
Scott, these are federal dollars?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Any more questions from the dais? Does the public have any questions on the motion on the floor to pursue the CDBG grant for home rehab?
I do have another question.
Oh.
Sorry.
Commissioner Farnsworth and then Commissioner Glanzer?
How often can you apply for these grants?
There'll be another cycle in January. If you are funded, you cannot reapply until you've closed out and finished the grant you have underway.
Do they come every year?
There's a cycle. There's supposed to be one every year. The state has kind of had 2 in a year, and then they've delayed it. But they're trying to get back on an annual schedule. So if you were awarded a housing grant, you would not be able to apply for the federal fiscal year 2018 funds, but then you would be able to apply for the 2019 funds.
If we had successfully completed
Right,
everything
and
we've
you would,
done. Right.
yeah, I mean, I don't want to say we would be your administrator. There's a procurement process. We typically close them out in 18 months.
Okay. Commissioner Glanzer?
To follow up on Commissioner Martin's question, if it's a federal grant, but we vote not to, apply for it, doesn't $700,000 just go to another city in Florida?
absolutely,
So we
yes,
would
ma'am.
just lose that opportunity, right, if we don't vote for it, so,
Yes, ma'am.
okay. Yeah.
Okay, did I have any public comment on the motion on the floor? Just want to make sure. Commissioner Martin?
Scott, what's the state have to do with it? You mentioned the state.
Larger communities like, let's say Gainesville or Jacksonville, they receive money directly from HUD through a formula allocation process. The HUD gives these funds to the state to administer, and then the state reallocates them through the competitive process to small communities.
Okay.
Hearing no public comment, any further questions from the dais? All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye. Aye. Roll call, Commissioner Coleman. Aye. Commissioner Farnsworth. Aye. Commissioner Martin. No. Commissioner Glanzer.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-1.
Okay.
Okay, and I'll entertain a second motion to proceed with the economic development category. If anyone wants to make that motion. I have a motion from Commissioner Farnsworth,
Second.
a second from Commissioner Glanzer. Any questions about the CDBG grant for ED? Any questions from the public on the motion for economic development CDBG grant? Hearing none, we'll just go right to a roll call. Commissioner Coleman? Aye. Commissioner Farnsworth? Commissioner Martin? Commissioner Glanzer? Motion passes 3-1. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you
Is
all
that-
very much.
That everything you needed from us?
Yes, sir. I'll be back on the 23rd with the draft of the application.
We look forward to it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you all.
Okay, we will now have a quasi-judicial public hearing regarding the first reading of ordinance 2018-11. I'll begin by reading the procedure, which is to ensure that the applicant provides a complete presentation of their request prior to any testimony being provided by the staff. All public testimony will be taken under oath. Everyone testifying will be subject to cross-examination. All documents and exhibits shall be entered into evidence. The giving of opinion testimony is limited to experts, and closing arguments will be limited to the evidence of record. The procedure we will follow this evening is that we will first hear from the applicant with no time limit. Second, the applicant will then be subject to cross-examination. Third, the staff will then enter the staff report into the record and answer any questions. Fourth, the applicant will have the opportunity for rebuttal of any testimony against the application. Fifth, the floor will be open for public comment, with each presentation being limited to 5 minutes. Members of the public will have an opportunity to question the applicant or the staff. Sixth, the applicant will have an opportunity for closing arguments. And finally, the public hearing will be closed and the commission will enter into deliberations. If you are here tonight and have any intention or inkling that you might want to speak, could you please stand now so our clerk could administer the oath to you? It'll save time if you're not even sure. You're going to stand up. Go ahead, just in case. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Do you hereby swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth? You have been testimony. Please state your name again.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before we get started, Commissioner Coleman, have you had any ex parte communication on this matter?
No, sir, Mayor.
Commissioner Farnsworth, if you have any ex parte? No. Commissioner Martin?
No, sir.
Commissioner Glanzer? And I have not as well. Are we good, Mr. Attorney? We are. Thank you, sir. Okay. Do we have an presentation from the applicant? Are we going to move straight to 3?
Do you want to have any comment at this time?
We'll
I'll
move
go
straight
ahead
to the staff
and
presentation.
present that so you can see a map and have an
Thank
idea
you.
of what's before you. This particular application, you've got the comprehensive plan amendment request before you now, and it's part of the change of the land use and the zoning process when we annex properties into the city. So these two 5-acre parcels that are before you tonight, one that's south, just south on the south side of Southwest 90th Avenue, and then on the other one's on the south of Southwest 93rd Avenue. And both of those were recently annexed in May and in June, and they are 5-acre parcels. They're considered small-scale plan amendments. The next step, once you annex your properties, is to change your comprehensive plan, your future land use map. When they come into the city, they have the county land use of agriculture, rural agriculture. So we're going to change the future land use map designation to match what the city has. And that's our first step. And then after that, you would change your zoning to implement your future land use map. So in this case, we have 2 hearings that you go through each time because we adopt ordinances as opposed to resolutions for this process. So in changing your land use, once that's done, the rezoning is contingent upon the land use being adopted. In this plan amendment, the first one is changing, as you can see, the dark color being the city's designation for agriculture, the light color, the county rural agriculture. So we would be changing the parcels to agriculture, the city's designation, which is the same. The recommendation is the staff recommends approval of this application. And you'll note that the Planning and Zoning Board heard this item as well and recommended approval. So you have an ordinance before you, and this would be your first hearing, and you'll have your second hearing on the 23rd of July. And at that time, you would be able to adopt if you chose.
Does Dias have any questions for staff? Did the applicant hear anything that they'd like the chance for rebuttal on? Okay, we'll open up the floor for public comment then. Does anyone have any public comment? Hearing none. Do you have any closing arguments you'd like to make? Fine. And now we will close the public hearing, and the commission will enter into deliberations. Mr. Attorney, can you go ahead and read by title only the ordinance?
Ordinance 2018-11, CPA 18-03, an application by the City of Newberry for a small-scale plan amendment to the future land use plan, map of the City of Newberry Comprehensive Plan, to change the land use category from Alachua County Rural Agriculture to City of Newberry Agriculture on properties previously voluntarily annexed into the city, identified it as Alachua County parcel numbers 02667, 005, 000, and 02667, 002, 000.
Yeah, the appropriate motion would be to pass the ordinance as read. Do I have that motion? Motion from Commissioner Martin, second from Commissioner Coleman. Any questions on the motion on the floor? Does the public have any questions on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. We'll move on to our second quasi-judicial public hearing. Again, this procedure is to ensure that the applicant provides a complete presentation of their request prior to any testimony being provided by the staff. All public testimony will be taken under oath. Everyone testifying will be subject to cross-examination. All documents and exhibits shall be entered, and evidence giving opinion testimony is limited to experts, and closing arguments will be limited to the evidence of record. Procedure we follow this evening is that we will first hear from the applicant with no time limit. The applicant will then be subject to cross-examination. Staff will then enter staff report and record and answer questions. The applicant will have the opportunity for rebuttal of any testimony against the application. The floor will then be open for public comment with each presentation limited to 5 minutes. Members of the public will have an opportunity to question the applicant on the staff. The applicant will have an opportunity for closing arguments. Public hearing will be closed and the commission will enter into deliberations. Does anybody else need to take the oath? Awesome.
Mayor.
Does anyone have any ex parte to report?
Mayor, I just got one. For anybody that's first time being here, he does hire out for auto. I don't know if you ever heard the commercials at the end. He can actually do that.
Thank you. A little plug. Yeah, I appreciate that. Does anybody have any ex parte they need to report on this item? I do not. No. No. Hearing none. Are we good, Mr. Attorney? Thank you, sir. Okay. Ms. Wendy, are you going to do this presentation? We're going to jump to item 3 as well, I think.
We're going to go right, the next
staff.
item, this is your, the application by the applicants, but it's essentially the city takes us through the process to change the zoning, like the land use, from the county's designation to the city's designation. So again, this one would be changing the zoning on the property from agriculture, from the county to the city's agriculture designation. The recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Board as well as staff is for approval. Note also that in your ordinance, you will also have there's a section in there that says when it's effective, and just the regulations for what we call small-scale plan amendments, because they're under 10 acres in size. It specifies that your rezoning, as with any plan amendment, is going to be contingent upon the approval of the plan amendment. And the way the law reads is once your plan amendment's approved, which if you approve it and adopt your ordinance on the 23rd of this month, then 31 days from that date is when the applicants, the owners, could apply for other kinds of permits if they were interested in moving a home or on there or whatever they might be doing, or building a home. So any kind of permit would be issued as of that date on.
Okay. Did I have any questions for staff? Did the applicant hear anything they'd like to rebut? Okay. Floor is open for public comment. Do I have any? Hearing none. Would you like to make a closing argument? We will close the public hearing, and the commission can enter into deliberations. Mr. Attorney, will you please read the ordinance by title only?
Ordinance 2018-12, LDR 18-06, an application by the City of Newberry to amend the official zoning atlas of the City of Newberry by changing the zoning from Alachua County Agriculture A to City of Newberry Agriculture A on properties recently annexed into the city, identified as Alachua County parcel numbers 02667, 005, 000, and 02667, 002, 000. This application is contingent upon approval of application CPA 18-03.
The appropriate motion is to pass it as read. I have a motion from Commissioner Coleman, a second from Commissioner Farnsworth. Any questions on the motion on the floor? Any public questions on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. All right, we'll now move on to our agenda items. Mr. Thomas, are you going to move us through the request to waive rezoning fees?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
This item, as stated, is a request for waiver of rezoning fees. A little bit of background. Ms. Judy Hassan Lewis has been working with several property owners on a privately initiated rezoning project. Currently, the land development regulations require that an application fee for under 10 acres, it's $1,700, be accepted for or be received for each parcel in a rezoning. Those fees are to cover the costs of mandatory public notices, the mail-outs that have to go in 400-foot radius around the property in residential areas, basically so that the costs aren't borne by the general public but by the people who are actually making the application for the action. In this particular instance, there are 21 parcels total, owned by 18 individuals. Actually, I should say our families, because some of the individual owners are also multiple owners within the family. But it totals, the 18 parcels would be a total of $30,600 in application fees to rezone all of those properties. I did make a determination that we could treat all of them together, because they're all contiguous, as a single application, which would require only a single application fee of $1,700 instead of the $30,000. Estimate that the hard costs for advertising are going to, and the mail-outs will be somewhere in the $1,200 to $1,600 range, just based on the size of the ads that will have to be run and the number of advertisements. Ms. Lewis is requesting that all application fees be waived. The project area itself comprises about 6¼ acres. Approximately 1,500 acres are zoned for residential use in the city of Newberry. 286 roughly, more or less, acres are zoned to allow for single-family mobile homes in the city already. And the residential single-family mobile home zoning district comprises about 19% of all the residentially zoned properties in the city at this time. Give you a little perspective on the map. That's the project area. There's 250th Street, State Road 45, just one block to the east. Down at the bottom, you've got Newberry Road. Again, it's 6¼ acres. It's currently zoned RSF2, which does not allow for mobile homes. It only allows for single-family site-built homes. And it does provide a buffer between State Road 45 and the single-family mobile home zoned area. And so you've got commercial intensive on roughly the first or second parcels along State Road 45, headed from State Road 45 west, and then the remainder of that block is comprised of the single-family residential 2 category, which does not allow for mobile homes. And so to back up a little further, you can see the project area there and the various different zoning categories throughout the city. Right now we've got 3 primary areas where the residential single-family mobile home 2 category already exists. You've got the primary area, which is adjacent to the project area. It entails about 195 acres that are already zoned to allow for mobile homes. You've got the area to the south, which is about 79 acres, which allow for mobile homes, and another corner up there to the northeast, which is about 12 acres. In total, again, you've got about 286 plus or minus acres, which is about 19% of all residentially zoned properties within the city's boundaries. And that does not include agriculturally zoned properties, which allow for mobile homes anyway, by right. That's just the residential zoning districts specifically. Therefore, given the costs stated, staff recommends for denial of the request to waive all application fees for the rezoning project. I think that at a very minimum we should collect enough to maintain or to recoup the hard costs for advertising and public notice that are going to be spent.
Brian, is that the end of your?
Yes, sir.
Or can you pause for a second? Commissioner Glanzer.
So you would be okay if we lumped them all together and just had one fee of $1,700? And did you say there was about 18 owners, 18 homes?
There's 21 parcels. A lot of it's vacant, some of it's not. And then of that, there are 18 owners of
Okay.
the 21 parcels, but then within the 18 owners, several of those parcels have multiple owners of the individual parcels.
So what I was getting at then, it would be about between $75 and $100 each, if each one of them just put a little bit in towards the $1,700, because that's a hard cost that we have, I mean, more or less. So if we charge them $1,700, then each one would only have a little bit to pay if they want to get together and do that. Another question I had was, I mean, historically, how did this little strip, do you think, get left out when the 195 acres next to it has RSF and mobile home?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, staff believes that it was actually very intentionally put in as a buffer between the state road and then going back in further into the neighborhood. The zoning itself predates my tenure by quite a few years, if not decades, but I have been told by people who were on staff at the time that the intent was to create a buffer. And if you look at the larger picture, you can see that along the major corridors, there are various buffers. You've got the commercial buffers right along the corridor, and then surrounding those commercial buffers, you in general have a site-built residential zoning district.
Okay, thanks. And then the last question, if I could. So even if they make application, whether or not they pay the $1,700 or not, it would still come before the board, and we'd have to approve that rezoning. So
Yes,
this
Mr.
isn't
Mayor.
the last.
The first step then would be, once all the applications for each individual parcel are collected with the owner's affidavits signed and notarized, that they were actually wanted to be a part of the action, then the first step would be to go to the Planning and Zoning Board as soon as those were collected. Once the Planning and Zoning Board made their recommendation to the Commission, it would come before the Commission as in the form of an ordinance for the rezoning. So then you'd have 2 more hearings on it.
Mike?
Brian, to Commissioner Glanzer's question, and I know you'd indicated you've been working on this for some period of time now. Once that application comes through, have you got an indication whether staff would support the application request or would oppose and recommend denial?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the staff has looked at this quite a bit, and from a planning perspective, it's very common to create buffers like this and to maintain buffers like this as part of the aesthetics of the community, as well as the direction the community has wanted to go. Buffering is kind of an important part of transitioning from one area to another, and this is obviously was created as that kind of a buffer. Considering now that we've gotten a fairly good idea of how much available land is out there already zoned to allow for mobile homes within the residential districts of the city, staff would not be recommending for approval of the application request to rezone going forward.
Commissioner Glanzer?
I have one more question then, because up right here on 26, one block off, we've got mobile homes all up and down, what would that be, 258th or something like that? So would that be fair in comparison?
That's the area to the south there, and it does look like roughly a block or less off of that, in that one section, it was zoned for that. So I was not able to locate it prior to tonight. There is a statute that in state law that says that you have to designate a certain area that's allowable for mobile homes. I believe it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 10%, if I remember what I read correctly a few years ago. And we almost have double. If I'm correct, and it's 10%, we'll find that number for definitively going forward. But we would be almost twice what the state statute requires already.
Any other questions from the dais for staff? Commissioner Farnsworth?
If parcel already has a house on it, are they going to remove the house to put a mobile home on it?
Mr. Mayor, I don't believe that's what's going to happen. There would certainly be no requirement for that. In fact, there are a couple of mobile homes already in the project area. They're grandfathered in because they were there prior to the zoning change. It would just simply allow them the choice between putting a site-built home versus a mobile home in that area, which is currently not allowed. But if if a site-built home was demolished, they would not have to replace it with a site-built home. Whereas now, if one of the mobile homes that's there is taken off, then they would have to replace it with a site-built home.
Commissioner Coleman?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I know we're looking at waiving the fees, but out of all those parcels, how many are, or do we know how many are, putting them up to rent for income, like a business? Do we know that background at all?
Mr. Mayor, I don't have a definitive number on that, but we have been told by Ms. Lewis and another part of the applicant who owns a few of the parcels, Mr. Bishop, that that is his intent. I don't believe all of them would fall into that category, but we do know that at least some of them.
I understand the need for housing and over in that area, but if it's a business, then that's what I'm looking at, Mr. Mayor. That so we're going to waive a fee for these houses from a business owner. I'm looking at it on the side of are you going to put $40,000, $50,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 mobile homes in there, and we're going to change the zoning, and here it is. I mean, I don't know. I got to think about this one.
Commissioner Martin and then Commissioner Lancer.
Brian, of the owners, of these 18 owners, do you know how many of them currently own property adjacent to one of these vacant lots? My concern is that we're potentially going down a path where we're putting in mobile homes next to site-built homes that are not associated. I would be more in favor of an opportunity to upzone an area. I don't know if mobile homes necessarily would do that, but are a lot of those owners already living there? Do we know?
Mr. Mayor, there are some site-built homes in the area with residents, owner residents there. And so that would be one potential impact, is that existing owners with site-built homes would then potentially become next-door neighbors with a mobile home.
Okay. I'm not opposed to reducing the fee to a single listing, but I don't know that I would be in favor of rezoning it at the end of the line. So I guess maybe encouraging the applicants to be aware. I don't know that I would support rezoning it in the end, so whether they want to spend the money to do it or not is up to them and how they feel the rest of the commission may go. Thank you.
Commissioner Glanzer.
I'm not prepared to make that decision tonight because that's for another day, and I want to hear the arguments about that. So I would reserve my opinion until we hear all that. But the question I had was, do you know the number of vacant lots that are in there that could right now go to mobile homes? I know you're saying that if you tear one down, then you can replace it with a mobile home if we would move forward with the rezoning. But as it is right now, what is it, 3 or 4 vacant lots? Can't be a whole bunch, right?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, there's a fair number. It might be in the neighborhood. I haven't done an actual count of each individual parcel, but it's at least 50% probably are vacant right now of the 21.
Any other questions from the dais for staff? Brian, can you, in the backup material, it said 4 notarized and 13 unnotarized. Are those unnotarized affidavit? Are those forthcoming? Have we
yes,
heard
Mr. Mayor,
from those people?
Part of the process is you have to have an application for each individual parcel, or if you have parcels are in joint owner or single ownership, you can do one application for multiple. But we do also require an owner's affidavit notarized, stating that that's the intent of the owner, that they want to be a part of the rezoning. And thus far, of the 18 owners, I think we have 11 affidavits back, and 4 of the 11 have been notarized.
Because that's going to be a pretty significant difference moving forward if the commission decides to reduce it to 17, but you only get 4, then those 4 are on the hook for the 17. If you get all 18, then you got 18 splitting the cost of the 17. So at what point would they know?
Mr. Mayor, before the application would actually move forward to the Planning and Zoning Board review stage, that will have to have been resolved in terms of whether there's a fee, whether the fee's been waived. If there is a fee still in place, then the fee would have to be paid prior to moving forward with the process of the application to Planning and Zoning stage. And so at that point, we would have a better idea. And actually, the staff has scheduled to sort of assist the owners of the properties. Staff has scheduled a meeting Thursday afternoon at the Martin Luther King Center to have a notary public available to help them with the processing of the applications. And so even though we don't believe that our staff recommendation will be in favor, we're still trying to help the applicants get there.
And to Commissioner Coleman's concern, I'd like to ask legal, what are the ramifications, if there are any, of waiving the fee for a potential commercial venture versus a affordable housing sort of community come together venture? Is there an issue?
I'm not sure there's a legal implication with that. It's just more of a consideration from a fairness standpoint. I'm not sure that there's anything legal or illegal about that.
Okay, so it's just a precedent issue.
That's correct.
Staff, Mike?
And Mr. Mayor, for clarity, staff took some license with our fees, and we've done it, and there's some precedence for, especially in annexation, lumping many applications together, calling it one project, and letting them share some of the hard cost. So we understood this was a hardship, that $1,700 per parcel was a hardship. So we took staff license to say, well, if we called this one project and all these parcels moved together, staff made a call that $1,700 would fit the ordinance. I think the request of the City Commission, and at some point I think Ms. Lewis would speak, but the request of the City Commission is a waiver to zero, which staff is not able to make. If the Commission agrees to do that, that's fine, and that's within your purview. If the Commission says we're not willing to do that, then you could support staff's offer to call it one $1,700 project, but the request is not for you to reduce them to $1,700. We've kind of already made that offer. Your ask is to waive it altogether.
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner Martin?
I'll go ahead and make a motion to reduce the fee to
Well,
17.
Do we want to wait for public comment first, or?
There's not a motion on the floor yet.
No.
Yeah.
She's got a presentation
When
she
you-
wants to make. You want a motion on the floor to discuss? That's fine, we can do that way. I just was trying
Oh,
to
yeah.
get you the opportunity not to bring it back if you heard something in the public presentation. But go ahead. That sounds like you're going to make a positive
Yeah,
for the
no,
public.
I was
anyway.
going to make a motion to reduce the fee to the $1,700, assuming that they move forward as a complete listing.
Okay, I have a motion from Commissioner Martin, a second from Commissioner Coleman. Any questions from the dais on the motion on the floor?
I just would like to know, is that a hardship? You know, is that $1,700 if it's split up 18 ways, less than $100 each? Would that be a hardship for those people? And I'd like to hear from the applicant or the citizen on that.
So I think at this time we'll ask for public comment, and as any public comment is making her way up to the podium, I would just remind this commission has in the past taken a pretty hard line on not waiving hard costs. Hard costs have to be. We can waive soft costs, but the hard costs you're now asking the other taxpayers to come in and foot that bill. And so the bulk of the $1,700 is in the advertising. That's how we get to that number to begin with. Ms. Judy, don't forget to introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Judy Hassan Lewis, concerned citizen from Newberry Incorporated. And how this whole thing got started well over a decade ago is we started out with a vision for neighborhood revitalization. And some thoughts came up with doing something, constructing something that would be really attractive and would bring an additional economic base to the neighborhood. Well, things just didn't pan out, didn't happen. different plans, different efforts had been made, but over time, economic situations changed. And in the same area that we are talking about, there were 2 manufactured homes that were put in.
Speak into the microphone there, Mr.
2 manufactured homes had been put in already. One person would want to put a manufactured home in the area with the intent of renting it out, or maybe even selling it. But the other people, they want a place to live. And with economic status the way it is, situations where they are, people are more able to put in a manufactured home because it comes as a package deal than it will to build up from the ground. So they already have the land. This is land that their great-grandmama or somebody purchased. It has sentimental value. They don't want to get rid of the land. They want to have something there on the site where they can live. So I went around and I've talked to the people in the neighborhood. I've been with people out of town. The reason you have some notarized and some not notarized, because when I picked up the packets to take them around, I was told that they didn't need to be notarized. So you got signatures with people agreeing, but no notary because I was told they didn't have to be. But that's simple to fix. They can come and go get that notarized. The thing about the $1,700 is if you pay $1,700 and you've already heard staff say you wouldn't necessarily support, such a project, so you paid the $1,700 and you come up with nothing at the end. So we don't have $1,700 to just give away. People just don't have it. Not in the neighborhood. They just don't have it. So that's why I was asking if it could be waived. And then if you waive the fees and then you come up and you approve and you change the zoning and you say, oh, okay, you can put in a manufactured home, and then you pay the fees, that's a little different because you're paying for something.
We're having some lighting difficulties, Miss Judy, but that blinking light means you got 30 seconds left. So if you got
really?
any hardcore last comment you want to make, go ahead and throw it in, and then we'll open it up for these guys to ask you questions.
I don't do it with time, but I mean, just consider where it is in the neighborhood and what we're trying to do.
All right. Stay right there. Does the commission have any questions, Miss Judy? Commissioner Glanzer, do you have questions, Miss Judy?
I look forward to hearing all this when we get to that point down the road, to hear the arguments about rezoning it. But tonight, we're just talking about the fees, right? So I think, okay. So my question is, we staff, the cost is a hard cost for advertising and that kind of thing, and we don't have the kind of money we can do that at no cost. My question to you, did you hear, I did ask if we split it 18 to 20 ways, it'd be under $100 each. That's not even affordable, because that would be fair to the rest of the citizens who have to pay, that. None of us can.
I'll go back and ask. That's all, we have to meet and throw it out there and see what, I'm sure somebody.
Too much to lose if it got denied. Oh, you only lost $75, that wouldn't be as bad as saying I lost $1,700 for one person. But I personally, I couldn't in good conscience say waive everything, because other citizens can't maybe afford it too, but they have to pay it, and but if we reduced it, instead of having to pay 20 times $1,700, it's only one time, I think that's fair. So.
Any other questions from the dais for Ms. Judy? Okay, thank you, Ms. Judy. And just to be clear, the motion on the floor is to support what staff has already offered, reducing it to the 17, because staff has already made that offer. Is that correct? Okay. Any other public comment on the motion on the floor to support staff's offer of lumping them together as one 1,700? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Brian didn't go very far. Good. Come on up and lead us through a discussion to amend City of Newberry development fees.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, a discussion on whether or not the commission feels it's warranted to amend those fees. A little bit of background. Resolution 2018-08 established the fees for several categories of planning and development applications. That was an amendment of the previous resolution establishing fees. It didn't actually change any of the fee values. It just changed some of the bookkeeping really behind the scenes. Again, the fees that we charge are designed to ensure that the applicant who's going to benefit from whatever that land use action might be is the one that actually pays those fees rather than passing the cost of both advertising and public notice cost as well as staff time devoted to that application to the general public and the taxpaying citizens at large. And so currently, once an application is approved, say a change in future land use and zoning from agriculture to a subdivision, for instance, planned development of some sort maybe. As an example, typically there's a fee associated with that. You go through the process, the change is made, and then you have your planned development as an example. If you come back and you say, I want to change a part of that, say the development order that was associated with that rezoning, you basically have to pay the entire fee again to make that action, to make that request. In the case of something over 10 acres, the rezoning and all, it can get fairly expensive. $6,500 is the application fee for a larger scale development. On a smaller scale, say something like a special exception, the special exception is $2,200. It includes, it entails a review of a site plan, approval of that site plan by the commission, or Board of Adjustment rather, as well as the conditions that are laid out under which that special exception can operate. And again, right now there's no provision if somebody wants to make a fairly minor amendment to their existing special exception or whatever the land use action is, there's no means other than the full application fee to go through that process. And so the question is, and that's back up just a little bit, that's a fairly common practice in most government agencies not to establish a lesser fee for amendments simply because oftentimes you think it's going to be a minor amendment, and as you get down into the process you find out there are other ramifications to the proposed amendment, and you end up in a full-blown review process anyway. But they can be as complicated and involve the same level of review, and the cost of the application fees typically also discourage repetitive or frivolous requests for amendments to existing land use actions. And so what we're requesting is guidance from the Commission for amendments to existing land use actions that are of a relatively minor nature, and we would come back to you and draw up some guidelines or criteria for what would constitute a minor versus a major amendment request.
Commissioner Martin.
Brian, does that encourage the applicant to only submit minor amendments, but just submitting more of them?
Mr. Mayor,
is that possible?
That's possible, depending on the fee structure for amendments that was developed and approved by the Commission. Say if you're still talking about a fairly substantial amount of money, in the example of a special exception, say you decided, well, if you want to amend it, a fairly minor amendment, we'll only charge you half the application fee for the amendment. Still be $1,100 in that instance, or for a larger one, it could be $3,500 or $3,250.
Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Martin.
Have you explored the idea of paying the full fee and us giving them back a credit if they don't submit so much stuff?
Again, Mr. Mayor, that could certainly be part of your guidance to staff to go back and develop a program of that nature. We're pretty wide open to how we go about it. And initially, the discussion is whether the Commission supports that at all, or whether the Commission thinks we're fine leaving it the way it is, the way the fee structure is structured right now.
Commissioner Glanzer.
I think I would like it if you don't charge them the same amount, the $6,500 the second time, and reduce the fee for minor changes. And let's see how it works. I mean, this could get really complicated. Well, if they come in 3 times, and so I would recommend. I mean, I would like it if we kept the $6,500 for the main fee, and then the first change they come in would be a highly reduced amount for just a minor change, and see how that works for a while. If it's not abused.
Before we move on with the conversation, I'd like to ask legal, do you have any, it seems to me if we put staff in, or the commission in the position of having to determine what counts as minor versus major, or is that just going to end up being a problem?
Generally speaking, it does create issues there. The drafting on it will be very challenging. There's different things in different areas of the law that we would look at or look to for some guidance. There's good faith provisions, discretionary provisions. There's what we call sometimes step transactions, where there's discretion by the city to determine that these transactions are linked together, and so they all amount to one single transaction, or one, in this case, amendment, and so forth. So those will be some challenges. I don't think there's any question about that.
Okay, so it's not like we shy away from challenges, but just knowing that, would you guys like to see staff work up something that they can bring back to you to present? Or do you not want to open up that? Well, our further conversation, or I'll entertain a motion at this point. Commissioner Martin, you look like you're formulating a thought.
Mr. Mayor, my thought was whether or not the provision of direction required an actual motion or not.
Well, I think if you don't want to go down the hole, if you don't want to even broach this subject, because I think when we ask this question, we all have something probably pretty minor in mind when we pose this. What will happen in reality is someone will come and say, well, hey, this constitutes a minor provision and I want to be at the reduced, and staff will say, that's not really minor, that's pretty big. And then we're going to spend just as much time arguing whether it's minor or major. If there's, I kind of like the concept of collecting the whole thing, and then we work through the process, and if it turns out, yeah, that didn't take us very long, we refund the money. But even then, I think you get into the argument, they're going to argue, well, I'm owed a refund, and we're going to be saying, no, you're not. So, I think what the motion would be, because it sounds to me, especially from legal's perspective, this is going to be a fairly lengthy policy to write to try to figure out how do you define minor and those kinds of things. And there might be a lot of clauses and caveats, and so we'd be directing staff to spend some time on this if you want to go down. That would be the motion. If you don't want staff to spend the time on it, then we would direct them not to. Commissioner Martin? Commissioner Glanzer?
I think it's worth spending time on it, and I want that, because I think it's unfair the way it is now. So if we could, we're going to make a lot of fees in the future, one way or the other, and I think it's worth it, making it fair enough to, the public, the way we do it. Because right now, if you're saying they pay $6,500 the first time, and then if they want to make a change, they come back with another $6,500, I think that's unfair. So, I mean, when you say a lot of time, I don't want to be unreasonable, but maybe it's worth a little time.
Rich?
Mayor, I was just going to say this is not going to be decided tonight, so we can do a motion, but it's not necessary.
Mike?
And to your point, and not to persuade the commission one way or the other, that we oftentimes are guilty of applicants reading the fee schedule and then trying to make their request fit the fee they choose. And the application that brought this whole issue forward, the applicant looked at our fee schedule and picked out the cheapest one, and he said, I want my application for X to be called Y, because I'm willing to pay a $200 fee and I don't want to pay whatever the fee is supposed to be. And so just to let the commission know, those are the kind of things that staff deal with on a daily basis, that people just pick what they're willing to pay, and that's what they want their application to be called.
Commissioner Martin and then Commissioner Coleman.
Yeah, I guess that kind of speaks to a little bit of what we were talking about before. To throw another option out there, maybe we could look at the initial application of either of these, but allowing a certain number of minor amendments be included, or maybe just reduce the initial fee and just charge for every amendment an X number of dollars every time they come through, whether it's minor or major. I trust to put it back on your plate to figure out what is a good list of options for us to choose from. I always kind of advocate that we'll make pretty good decisions if we're given good information and good options, so I would probably point us in that direction.
Commissioner Coleman.
I agree with Commissioner Martin on that. Put it on staff on that. This certain one that brought it up, I did not know the history of that. It was already a special exception that was done before I had ever got on the dais, and then now you're going to turn around and then, there's got to be an easy process here. There's got to, but I don't. And I agree with Commissioner Glanzer. I mean, the business side of me says yes. You pay. You want it. You got to pay for it. The other side of it says, well, it's not really that fair. This one instance is that, hey, this was already a special rezoning. Is that what we call that, or what
Special exception?
Exception, yeah. It was already an exception. So I'm gonna stand behind staff on whatever you recommend on this. I know I'm throwing it back on you, but this it's tough. I believe that staff knows the right direction on this, and I'm going to be 100% behind you on this.
Okay, I got 3 commissioners who think it's worth having staff spend some time and bring back some options. Commissioner Martin, did you want to put that in the form of a motion?
I guess, well, not
Just
at the moment. Just more feedback. I mean, if you look at this permitting and fee structure, there's dozens of charges for different items that are scheduled, and gosh, if we could just get a fewer amount of baskets and make it a little bit more understandable, I think that'll streamline the decisions that you have to make at your desk, and hopefully will clarify it for any of the applicants as well. But yeah, I mean, I couldn't understand where I belong in this at all. So, but to my point, I would go ahead and formulate a motion in the direction of having staff go back and take a look at the comprehensive. No, just going back and looking at the fee schedules, coming back to us with a couple of options.
Do I have a second? I have a motion from Commissioner Martin, a second from Commissioner Glanzer. Commissioner Farnsworth, were you reaching for the mic?
Yes.
Commissioner Farnsworth, you have the floor.
Just wondering what percentage come back and ask for an amendment.
Mr. Mayor, it's not a very high percentage. I guess conceivably some of them might not, because of the fee being what it is. They just don't want to get over that hurdle. It's conceivable that could be part of it, the reason we don't see more. But there's not a huge amount at this point. And so that is something to consider, is that if there's not a whole lot of demand for it, how far does the commission want to go to accommodate the small number that do? And
Now,
actually,
what have we done with the small number that do in the past?
I'm
We
sorry?
just charged them the full fees?
Yes, sir.
Any other questions from the dais for staff? Public comment.
Jim Stainfield, citizen.
Welcome
Two
again.
comments. First one is you're always going to have individuals push the system and really abuse it, and so worrying about cutting it for a few people that want to game the system, I wouldn't bother with that. Second one is, one of my favorite sayings is, come back to this, hold on a second. Lack of planning on your part doesn't mean an emergency on my part. If people were planning their projects better, you wouldn't have this problem. They would already have it figured out, they'd already know what they're going to do, there wouldn't be an amendment. If that's the case, then you didn't plan well.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comment on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, any further comment on the dais? All those in favor of the motion on the floor to direct staff to bring back some options and some policy decisions signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Roll call, Commissioner Coleman. Aye. Commissioner Farnsworth.
No.
Commissioner Martin.
Aye.
Commissioner Glanzer. Motion passes 3-1. All right, and Dallas, I think you are up to take us through establishing the estimated assessment rate for fire rescue. Dallas, is this similar to the millage where we set a high tonight that we can reduce, but we can't go above? Is
Yes,
that
sir,
correct?
Mr. Mayor, that is correct. The rate you set tonight is the rate that'll be noticed on your trim notices that'll go out in the middle of August. As the mayor said, this is the cap. You cannot go above it without renoticing all of your residents. Staff is not proposing an increase in the fire assessment this year. We propose a fire assessment rate of $175, which, as I mentioned, is the same as last year. And again, this is your preliminary rate. The commission will have another chance to revisit it at the end of August.
I would remind the commission that the last 25 of that 175 has been dedicated to fund the fire station remodel, which we just got the ambulance for to go into the ambulance bay. And there's 5 years left on that 25?
Yes,
that
sir.
correct?
And since the commission voted to pay it off, the fiscal year 18 budget includes those funds as a repayment back to the reserves.
Okay, so now we're paying ourselves back into the reserves.
Yes, sir.
Okay, any questions for Brian on the fire assessment?
Is the
Or
fire,
Dallas.
I have a question.
Commissioner Farnsworth.
Is the fire assessment tax deductible?
Under the new tax law, I am unsure.
Since it's not a tax, it's a fee. So I don't believe it's tax deductible.
I don't believe it is, but I know under the old tax law it was not. I know there were changes to state and local taxes under the new tax law, but I'm not qualified to provide
If
that.
fees are tax deductible, we need to change everything we do. We'll make it all fees, and we take it off of everything else. Any other questions or comments about setting? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion that we maintain the fire assessment fee for the upcoming year at $175.
Do I hear a second? I have a motion from Commissioner Martin and a second from Commissioner Coleman. Any other comments on the motion on the floor from the dais?
I should probably clarify the max at $175. Pardon me.
Will you amend your second on that, Commissioner Coleman? All right. Any questions from the public on the fire assessment fee, max being $175? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Roll call, Commissioner Coleman? Aye. Commissioner Farnsworth? Commissioner Martin? Aye. Commissioner Glanzer? Motion passes 3-1.
Thank you.
We have a lot of splits here tonight. I like it. All right, it's good. All right, public comments. City manager? Oh, Lloyd's got pages. Oh, all right.
Mr. Mayor, I'll try to be brief tonight. Start with Scott Walker's birthday is Wednesday, so when Wednesday gets
I'm sorry, Mr. Manager. My fault. We need to read the resolution into the record before we
That
move
is why
on
I'm
from the
back.
fire assessment. Mr. Attorney, will you correct my error, please?
Thank you, I appreciate that. Resolution number 2018-25, a resolution of the City of Newberry, Florida, relating to the provision of fire rescue services, facilities, and programs in the City of Newberry, Florida, establishing the estimated assessment rate for the fire rescue assessments for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2018, directing the preparation of an assessment roll, authorizing a public hearing, and directing the provision of notice thereof, and providing an effective date.
Was that your motion, Commissioner Martin? Was that your second, Commissioner Coleman?
Yes, it was.
And roll call, Commissioner Coleman?
Aye.
Commissioner Farnsworth? Commissioner Martin? Commissioner Glanzer? Still passes 3-1. I apologize. All right, City Manager, could you start that comment over again? Because I
Back.
realized about halfway through that I had made that mistake. So,
Back to City Attorney Scott Walker. His birthday is Wednesday. If you think about it on Wednesday, please give him a shout out. Wish him a happy birthday. Today is my 4-year anniversary with the city. So it's been 4 wonderful years. I appreciate you guys having me.
no more new jokes.
No more new jokes. We're going to change the tag to say old manager. As most of you are aware, we've made a presentation to 5 different advisory committees for Alachua County last week with 2 proposals for them to consider for bringing the fairgrounds, the Alachua County Fairgrounds, or some portion of the Alachua County Fairgrounds to Newberry. Overall, it was pretty warmly received, I thought, and Newberry was given credit for being innovative. And on Wednesday, we're going to make a very similar, hopefully a little more polished presentation. I won't call any names, but the presenter stumbled a few times. And hopefully we can eliminate all those things. Staff's making me sit down and watch the presentation tomorrow, and then they're going to critique me.
Be harsh.
Please be harsh. I will be out of town next week at the the annual conference for the Florida Municipal Electric Association. But I will spend about 30 minutes in the morning and afternoon checking emails, returning phone calls. So it's a work week for me, so don't feel any hesitation about contacting me. If it's something that can be handled by our very capable staff, please reach out to Amy or the appropriate department head. I'm sure they'll be happy to help you out. Well, last 2 items. Not a Newberry resident, but a North Central Florida resident who, by extension, we like to claim as part of our own. Miss Lynetta Usher Griner received the prestigious honor of being named the Florida Farmer of the Year. And we have put together a card. There's a kind of a bio that explains what that means. But Newberry is the self-proclaimed agricultural community, and when someone in our community is named Florida Farmer of the Year, I think it's appropriate that we express our congratulations. In this envelope, which I'm going to be passing across, is just a card expressing warm sentiments to Ms. Griner, and I'd appreciate it if you guys would consider adding your signatures, and we'll get it in the mail tomorrow. And finally, since I think this is my last meeting before City Attorney Courtney Johnson is no longer the city attorney, or maybe that's still in flux. Hopefully that's still in flux. I just wanted to publicly express my admiration for the work she does. She is the strongest work ethic of anybody I've worked with in 33 years of career. She's bright, she's intelligent, she's passionate. She is, with no disrespect to anybody, the best city attorney that I've ever worked with. So you're going to be sorely missed, and the Newberry community and Newberry City Manager love you, and we wish you the very best.
And she's nice.
And she's nice. Well, some I've heard comments about blonde and ponytail, but we don't have to go there tonight. That concludes my comments, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Mr. Attorney?
Mayor Marlowe, I again want to say thank you for the introduction at the beginning of tonight's meeting, and I actually want to echo the same thoughts from Mr. New, that our law firm will definitely greatly miss Courtney, and if I'm lucky, I may drag her to a couple more meetings with me before the end of the month. So, but I am looking forward to working with everybody here at the City of Newberry. I'm very excited about it.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk?
Just wanted to wish Courtney the best. I will miss her. I've enjoyed working with her. Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you. Commissioner Coleman?
All right. Just want to remind everybody again, July 19th, the meet and greet for Darlow running for Alachua County judge. And where's that at again?
Bullock Law Firm.
Bullock, that's right.
Right here on Newberry Road.
Right, right. everybody needs to go by and meet her, and I think she's going to be a great addition once she wins. You see that glass is half full, not empty. Just need prayer for not me, not Reese, but my beautiful wife, Marcy, because we're dropping Reese off Wednesday at Troy University, and these waves of I'm losing my child has really been really tough on her.
Don't let him fool you. He's going to be crying like a baby. He drops. Yeah.
And last but not least, Courtney, I know I'm the reason you're out of here. As many times have I been pulled into her office and she's stared me down and said, Ricky, you can't do this. She's finally getting away from that. But Courtney, I love you, and you were great. You really were here. And if you don't like what's happened, come on back. We will take you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Farnsworth?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Courtney if we could have one more ethics training, specifically for Commissioner Coleman, anyhow. But that's all. Good luck to you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Martin?
Yes, Ms. Courtney, good luck, and you were a welcome replacement for Scott.
Commissioner Glanzer?
And will you leave us your cell phone number so we can check in with you? We will miss you. And I also want to say to this community, thank you so much. In the loss of my family that had recently, this community is awesome, staff and this board and the community at large, the biggest heart in the universe, and I thank you from my heart. Thank you.
Well, I'll add my gratitude for the past year. You've guided me as mayor, and I appreciate all the late night phone calls, and you've always answered the text, and you've always been right there for me. I do appreciate it, and we wish you the best of luck. And I'm not going to give up. I've got a little bit of time left. We'll see what we can pull off. My last comment, I just wanted to reiterate, the city manager said that the presentation was warmly received. I would say that I haven't not stopped receiving phone calls of support for moving the youth and the agricultural activities to Canterbury. It is amazing. I have been talking to people, what is it, the 9th? I've been talking to people for 6 days that I don't know who they are, but they have contacted me to tell me that Canterbury would be an ideal location for what they're trying to do. So I applaud staff and this commission for having the innovative foresight to go to the county and say, hey, there's another option here. Instead of just putting everything on one campus, we can split these things out. You guys have once again blazed a trail, and I'm very hopeful that on Wednesday the 11th, the county commission recognizes that innovation and chooses to bring those activities out to Canterbury, because it's very clear that pretty much the entire county supports that option. And with that, we'll open it up to citizen comments. You have 5 minutes now.
Mr. Mayor, our Finance and Administration Director reminded me that I failed to remind the Commission that we have 2 budget workshops next Monday evening. No, 2 workshops. One is on budget, and that begins at 6 p.m. And the second is on the charter review, and that begins at 7.
I've got charter at 6 and budget at 7.
That is correct. That's right. Charter review is first at 6 p.m. Budget is at 7. And I'm told by Dallas that the budget workshop is planned to be 20 to 30 minutes max.
All right.
Now that finally concludes my comments.
Okay. Any last chance for public comment? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Everybody drive safe.
Yes, ma'am. It is 8:39.